August 12th, 2025. This is André Fauteux of La Maison du 21e siècle, 21st Century Housing Magazine. And I'm really happy today to have R. Blank with me of Shield Your Body in California. How are you, R?
Good, thank you. How are you doing?
Doing just great. Never played tennis 3 times a week in my lifetime, so it's a fantastic, really great summer. Yeah. We're north of Montreal. You're in California, and today we're going to talk about your upcoming book, Empowered, which is actually the sequel to the book you wrote with your father, Martin Blank. Many people know about him. Tell me first about your father and then about your company.
Sure. Well, my father, as you say, was Dr. Martin Blank, and he was one of the world's premier researchers into the health effects of electromagnetic radiation. His work focused largely on the extremely low frequency fields that are, from power lines and appliances. But he became later in his career very active on, for lack of a better or more accurate term, advocacy and activism side. So he's well known and well loved still in both scientific and activist circles for his decades of contributions to this field. I should also mention he was one of the authors of the Bioinitiative report, both the 2008 version and the 2012 update. And so once again, he did a tremendous amount for this field, and people still contact me today, thanking me for his work, and and he unfortunately, well, like we all have to, he passed away in 2018 when we were living together in Las Vegas, and it's taken so. We worked together on Overpowered. We wrote that together in 2012. I believe it formally came out in 2014. It could be 2013. And so this is Empowered, which is the book I'm releasing now, is it's sort of my sequel to Overpowered. Overpowered was a comprehensive review of what my father had learned about the health effects of electromagnetic radiation and how the science is controlled and manipulated by corporate interests. And since then, I've been running a company called Shield Your Body, and where I focus on the protection side. And I am, just to be 100% clear with your listeners who may not know me, I am not a scientist. I am obviously a skilled writer, which is how I got involved on Overpowered. I'm an effective communicator, public speaker, and I'm an entrepreneur. My training is in business. And so using my skills and my father's legacy, I have created Shield Your Body, and Empowered contains what I have learned in the past dozen years since working on Overpowered with my father. So whereas Overpowered is a summary of really of the science, Empowered is a consumer guide to protecting yourself from these forces.
Mhm. But you do make a very good summary of all the science. And many people, I think, started worrying about the power lines when I started writing about this in the my God, late 80s. But certainly today, it's really interesting to see more and more people are finding they feel better if they turn off the Wi-Fi, for instance. But
Yeah.
a lot of people, there's also a lot of denial out there. So tell me how you present the book. I'm really fortunate to be able to read your one of your last proofs. Your one your
Yes, thank you very much for all the feedback you've given me on the science chapters. And to explain, this is not a book about the science. Like I say multiple times in Empowered, if that's what you're looking for, I strongly suggest referencing Overpowered because it is still highly relevant. That said, knowing full well that this might be the only book that someone picks up on this topic, I wanted a chapter that does summarize the scope of what we know about the health impacts of these forces. And so um, chapter 2 of the book, right? It shows chapter 1 is what is EMF, and then
Yeah.
chapter 2 is the health effects. And I try to express just how vast what we know is. And at one point in the book, I say, the story the science is telling us is that we find these biological impacts in virtually every biological system where we look for them. And then I give examples of those because I know for some people new to this topic that might seem extreme, maybe even difficult to believe. So I give an overview of those, and then I go into some of the mechanisms that could explain such a wide breadth of disease and symptoms. And then that is really the only chapter on the science. But again, what's important also to me that people understand is that even the chapters that aren't about the science are firmly rooted in the science, because that has been a guiding light for me in the Shield Your Body journey, is that we focus on things that have tangible, measurable benefit. Because when you get into the realm of EMF protection, there are plenty of options that don't have that. And so the entire book is firmly rooted in science, even though it's not about the science.
Yeah, there's a lot of protective devices out there. You see these pop-up Facebook videos saying, this great product, but it's very often these products, they're talking about quantum physics because you can't measure anything any different.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's a point also that I make in the book, which is I don't take the perspective that all of those products are bogus. My perspective is I know that many of them are, and it is exceedingly challenging to be able to tell the difference when the product claims are not based in measurable fact and science.
Mhm.
And until we have a better understanding of what all of these types of products may or may not do, and hopefully at some point more effective regulation to help protect consumers, my advice to people is to focus on the things that we know through science and that we can measure with devices and see numbers that actually tell the story.
Mhm.
Which, by the way, is something that my father really hit home. And I'm not talking about while writing Overpowered. I'm talking about at home around the dinner table. And my mother would say, "Oh, I'm trying this new crystal," and my father would say, "How do you measure it? How do you in our house, nothing could pass unless you could actually state measurements to support your claims."
He was a PhD in what, biophysics,
He had one in biophysics and one in biochemistry.
right?
Yeah, one from Columbia and one from Cambridge.
Mhm. I do know, for instance, that Shungit, the stone from Karelia, Republic of
Russia.
does work. Magda Havas, we tested her with muscle testing or your balance testing at the first EMF conference in California, maybe not too far away from you.
I've also seen actually it's there's not much of this that I've seen, but I've seen published work supporting some degree. I can't remember. I'm not trying to diminish it. I just can't remember the specific claim. But there's published science that's supporting at least some of the claims of shungite, and I just don't remember it.
Yeah,
But
that's
it does seem to be emerging.
yeah. I have some Russian papers and others, but of course, people with protective devices, people tend to have a false sense of protection. They tell me what the first thing to do is to reduce your exposure, right?
Yes, yeah. So the book is broken into several parts. And before we even get into protection products, there's an entire section, several chapters on what you should do with your own personal behavior and your relationship with technology. And you know, an obvious example is not speaking on your phone up to your head. But there are many, many examples, and you know, there's a chapter on how to use your phone more safely. There's a chapter on what you can do in your bedroom, because the bedroom, as I explain in the book, and it's one of the foundational principles of building biology, is the bedroom is the most important room in your home. From a health perspective, and then another entire chapter on your office and or workspace, it goes into detail about the ways in which you relate to these technologies is the most important thing that you can be doing to reduce your exposure. And at one point in the book, I explain you shouldn't be spending $1 on anything until you've at least started to make progress on the behavioral changes. Because as with any toxin or pollutant, the most effective protection is reducing or eliminating the exposure in the first place. And as I think I have many examples in the book to show, there are a lot of opportunities for people to do that when it comes to EMF without really interfering with or altering their enjoyment of modern technology.
Yeah, well, one thing I was reminded of is that there's Echo routers out there and baby monitors also that are
Hmm.
others. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so there is a chapter on how companies could make technology safer. And in that, I talk about certain design principles that are, for example, implicit in how a Wi-Fi router works or how a cell phone works. And if we changed some of those principles, how the same exact technology, like a Wi-Fi router, could be used much more safely without any sacrifice in the actual functionality of Wi-Fi. And then I give several examples of how some companies are already doing this. And one that you just mentioned is JRS Eco out of
That,
Amsterdam, I believe. And he designed a Wi-Fi router. He didn't actually design the router. He buys the router and then reprograms it. And he reprograms it so that it emits 90% less EMF when you are using it and 0 EMF when you are not using it, right? Because for example, one of these design principles is that Wi-Fi is always on. It's always emitting.
the beacon
Um,
signal,
I'm sorry?
the beacon signal
Yes.
devices,
Yeah.
the channel is available.
But that means it's always emitting even when you're not using it. So he altered the firmware on this device so that it's only transmitting when you're actively using the connection.
Mhm.
Another thing you can do with your router is to turn it off at night. But he also made it very easy for you to set a schedule on that router, on his version of the same router, so that it can automatically go off at your bedtime and automatically come on it when you get up in the morning. And he did several of these things that drastically reduce the EMF emissions from the router, but you still get full Wi-Fi in your home or wherever you are using this. And similar design principles are exemplified in the BebCare baby monitor, which is another one of these products that I talk about in that chapter.
Yeah, BEB, BebCare,
Yeah.
which is American, I saw. Yeah. Now, that's what people have to realize if they're not familiar with Wi-Fi. It's the same 2.4 gigahertz frequency as a microwave oven. Tell us a bit about the international standards, the exposure limits.
Um, well, uh, in general, these exposure limits, the first thing that I like to explain to people is that these exposure limits cover a small subset of technologies. And there are many, many technologies where there are actually no exposure limits. So one example, and this one isn't true in every country, but definitely in the United States, there are no exposure limits to how much EMF radiation the power line in front of your home is emitting and exposing you and your family to? None. There are some for the people who work in the power plant, right? Though, because those aren't consumers, those are industrial workers. Those are very high, but they at least exist. But at your house, there are no exposure limits for how much EMF you can be exposed to from the power line, or if you live next to a transformer, from the transformer. Another really increasingly relevant example are cars, because cars are tremendous sources of EMF. And I'm not just talking about Teslas and Priuses, because increasingly all cars have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and maybe LiDAR or some form of radar. A lot of them may have 5G connections to be able to do software updates and maintenance when you bring it to the shop. And it's very hard to actually know what connections are actually active in your car, much less how many you're running at once, much less if you figure out how to turn it off, does it really turn it off or not? Rob Metzinger did a very cool video with his safe and sound millimeter wave meter with one of his cars, showing how there was just massive 5G frequencies coming out of a part of his bumper. So cars are another area where there's no exposure limits. But when we do talk about exposure limits, so for example, cell phones are, they have exposure limits in, I believe it's every country in the world, certainly all Western countries, I believe most countries overall. And these limits, they vary from country to country, but in general, they're based on the ICNIRP standard. And the ICNIRP, it's the International Committee of Non-Ionizing Radiation
Mission.
I'm sorry? Commission? Yeah. And they're all based on something called the thermal effect. So you talked just now about how Wi-Fi is the same frequency as a microwave oven, right? So what that illustrates pretty clearly for people is that this type of EMF can actually be used to cook food. Unfortunately, it's not just food, it's also humans. And everyone recognizes, all international standards bodies, all international medical societies recognize that if you emit so much radiation that it actually starts to increase your body temperature, that you are triggering something that we call the thermal effect, right? Because it's heating you. And that is very damaging, even in short duration exposures. And so these standards that exist are all designed to prevent the thermal effect from kicking in. So they're all designed to prevent your phone from heating up your body. Now, it's been a long time since I've held a phone up to my head, and maybe this has changed, but I remember before I became EMF aware, there were definitely times I'd get off the phone call and my ear definitely felt warm. So you know, I don't believe that the way these standards are implemented even protect you against the thermal effect, but at least they theoretically do. And what that standard implies is that there is no exposure beneath the thermal effect that is harmful to your body. But what the science increasingly shows is that these regulations are based on very, very flawed assumptions.
Well, maybe talk about the tests they do in the lab with the SAM.
Sure. So people tend to think when they hear that, for instance, cell phone radiation is regulated, that the governments are actually testing these devices. And that is just not true. I don't believe there's any country where that's true. It's certainly not true in North America.
Well, France is checking that. France noticed that many manufacturers
Yeah,
do not respect
but
it.
I don't know if that's standard operating procedure or that was due to that one round of litigation.
Yeah, it's
But yeah, we do. I do talk. So we can get to that in a second. But what these regulations rely on is self-policing, self-enforcement. So when Apple releases a new iPhone, Apple hires a lab and pays that lab to run a test. And that test will then show a number, which the units are called SAR, which, I mean, that's not the units, that's the metric. The units are generally something like watts per kilogram, yeah, microwatts per kilogram, or something like this. So that is how much energy per unit of mass is being absorbed. But the point there is that the FCC, which sets the regulatory standard, is not the one testing. Apple is the one testing. And what you then have is a wide opportunity to manipulate the tests, to design the tests, to reveal results that are favorable. And one clear example of this is the iPhone manual, which tells you not to hold the phone against your body, because that's not how they held it in the test, right? Because there's no formal way that they have to handle the phone in the test. They got to design the test the way they wanted to. And so in their test, they hold the phone away from the dummy, the measuring model. And so that's what they put in the manual. Another key example of this, which you just brought up, Andre, is the PhoneGate scandal out of France, where the French government tested 300 different models of phones, and they found that 88% of them emitted more radiation than the manufacturers said they did. And several of them emitted more than was legally permissible and had to be recalled from the market. And again, I mean, 88% of them emitted more radiation than the manufacturers said.
and
So this
very
is a clear illustration of the risks of just letting the fox guard the henhouse.
yeah, and very often they only had to do a software update to reduce the emission.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that happened to Apple in the United States pretty recently. I don't remember what year, but yeah, they released a software update to get out of the FCC crosshairs.
Mhm. And to explain that that dummy test, it's a plastic head with a liquid simulating your brain liquid. And if after a 6-minute exposure to the radio frequency microwave exposure, you increase by 1 degree the temperature of the liquid in 6 minutes, that's when you're busting the limit. So that, as you said, your ear can get hot uh,
Yeah.
even faster because it's not 5 to 15 millimeters away from the head.
Yeah, and
But
there are plenty of other reasons why SAR, the specific absorption rate, is a very faulty model for regulation. I get into several of them in the book in Empowered. But from a top level, it's based on a fundamentally false belief that these non-thermal exposures are harmless. And what the science tells us is that they are not.
no, certainly not. I just want to share here for the skeptics out there, they should read what the American Academy of Pediatrics says. They're very worried about these FCC ICNIRP standards only protecting adults from thermal effects.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so in terms of the politics, we could talk for a long time. I think your book, what's really interesting is that you talk about all the solutions. So certainly you want to unplug electric devices around your bed as much as you can. You can go to Safe Living Technologies to get shielded wiring or even paints, graphite paint to block electric fields, low and high frequencies. But what I really like is notably your cell phone pouch. Tell us about that.
Oh, so, uh, well, stepping back, you should never carry your phone in your pocket,
Yeah.
or you should put it into airplane mode if you do. It's basically the number one, when people ask me for the free, simple things they should do, that's usually the number one thing I tell them. And just as an aside, I believe that carrying your phone in your pocket is likely the single largest avoidable source of EMF exposure for the vast majority of people. And the reason is because cell phones emit a tremendous amount of this radiation. People should realize, first off, the cell phone itself needs to be able to emit so much power that it can send a signal reliably over multiple miles, where the nearest cell tower should be. Not even your Wi-Fi router needs to come close to that. But then keep in mind that that's just the cell connection, because your phone almost certainly also has Wi-Fi. It almost certainly also has Bluetooth. It almost certainly also has NFC, which is used for things like Apple Pay and Google Pay, right? So a single cell phone is not only this super powered cell phone, but it's also a source of multiple other forms of EMF at the same time. And all of these exposures are additive. And when it's against your body, you are getting the maximum possible dose that this device has to emit. And so that's why, yeah. Oh, and when you carry it in your pocket, when people do this, they tend not to do it for 10 seconds or even 10 minutes. They tend to do it for hours at a time, almost every day of their lives. And so that's why I firmly believe that this is the largest single avoidable source of EMF for the vast majority of people. But then when you say don't carry it in your pocket, they'll say, well, where should I carry it? And then if you say, okay, well, carry it in your pocket, but turn it into airplane mode. And they say, but I can't get any calls if it's in airplane mode. And so I created the phone pouch, which you're talking about, but also multiple other products that are pouches or bags, fanny packs, a sling bag, that are all designed to make it safer to carry your phone. And the way in which my products do this is that the back of the pouch or the bag, or whichever one of these we're talking about, has radiation shielding in it. And we can talk in a second about how shielding works. But just briefly, it blocks and deflects radiation in the other direction. And the front of the pouch or the bag is unshielded. And that's what allows your device to continue transmitting and receiving signals. And so you can put your phone in the pouch and then put the pouch on your belt or in your pocket, and you are reducing your exposure to your phone's radiation while still allowing it to send and receive. So you can get calls or see when you get text messages or whatever it is you're waiting for that it has to be on for. Now, this is different from Faraday pouches, which I also discuss in the book. But Faraday pouches, which I don't make, but I talk about ones from a company called Silent, SLNT, in the book. Faraday pouches are designed to fully shield your phone. So when your phone is in a Faraday pouch, it is fully silenced. And that brings a lot of benefits, particularly on the privacy side. But one of the arguments I make in the book is if you're willing to, if your concern is EMF protection and you're willing to use a Faraday pouch, that means you're willing to go into airplane mode. So instead of buying a pouch, just put your phone into airplane mode, and then you'll cut out the EMF and your phone won't be sending or receiving signals. My products, like the phone pouch, like the sling bag, these are designed specifically for people who feel that they need to be in communication with other people, so they can't use airplane mode, and they want a safer way to carry their technology.
Like in business, eh? But yeah, I like what you mentioned a lot about behavior because manufacturers created new lifestyles. Many people can't go without a cell phone. I still have everything wired in my house. I have a cell phone, but my wife gives me hell because it's always in airplane mode or shut off.
Yeah.
It's only for her, you know? And then I get all these text messages and I have to get codes and turn it on, and I'm swearing every time. But I mean, it's a choice to depend or not. But I understand people in business, for instance, they want to be reached all the time.
Yeah. And some, some people, maybe they're not in business and they just feel like it. And, if they're not willing to take the lifestyle leap to be incommunicado, then they should have safer options. But a lot of people who are just working, yeah, during the day, it's particularly useful.
I find it funny because we're seeing more and more scientific studies on digital detox, and they only talk about the screen exposure at night and your brain always being on, and they never mention the wireless radiation. But it's a good sign.
Yeah, well, they do, but not in the way you're referring to, right? Because blue light is
Yeah.
a form of EMF, and it's one that is widely accepted to interfere with your circadian rhythms, which then interferes with your sleep, which then creates the context for enhanced anxiety, depression, reduced ability to recover or heal from illness. So there is a form of EMF associated with digital detox, but it's not often the radio frequency as you're explaining. But I will also say increasingly, and I agree with you, I'm seeing a lot of this research coming out where relationships with phones are being linked to a wide range of mostly mental health, but also physical health manifestations. And and people will ask me, how much do you think EMF is a part of this? And I say, honestly, with a device that is as powerful and all consuming as cell phones, it is really hard when you're saying, how much does your relationship with your cell phone lead to increased anxiety? It is very, very hard to say, well, this much is blue light, this much is the radio frequency, this much is how badly and evil Facebook was engineered to be, and so on and so forth. There are so many toxic forces coming off of that device that it's really hard to tease apart which part is causing what.
Mhm. Do you know Peter Sullivan? I met him in California at the EMF conference.
I've met him. I don't fully recall, but I definitely met someone with that name.
His background is interesting. Like you were also in the big tech industry before. You're an engineer, right?
Yeah, I was a software engineer.
Yeah, and he made a lot of money in that industry, and then he got very sick, and his two sons were autistic, so he started reading up, and now he's financing research and movies into MS. Peter's really, really amazing. What's his company again? I did a great interview on YouTube with him a couple of years ago. Um, but that's it. When parents are skeptical, they should really listen to other parents. It's the most convincing thing you can
Yeah,
do.
well, a healthier. I mean, I don't have children other than that dog that you saw earlier, and another one who's chilling in the living room. I don't have children, and I'm actually a little bit glad that I don't have to worry about bringing them up in a world like we have now. But I know enough about these issues to tell parents that focusing effort to ensure their children have a healthier relationship with their phones. The amount of science, you don't have to believe that EMF is bioactive. There's so many other reasons why fostering a healthier relationship with your phone is a core life skill that really should be something you work on. And so one thing I like to talk to parents about is the wait until eighth movement, which is a group of parents who advocate waiting until eighth grade to get their children a cell phone. And that is, again, that is not based on EMF health concerns at all. That's based around developmental concerns and just just what we were just talking about now. Phones are a source of so many different and super powerful toxins. And I'm not here to criticize phones. I mean, a lot of what I'm saying isn't the greatest, but I have a phone. I remember when they came out, not when they came out. I was 3 when they came out. But I remember when I first got mine, which was in 1998, and I thought, this is amazing. Like to go from I needed to be at a desk in order to call somebody to I can be anywhere in the world and call who I want. That was mind blowing to me, and I still find them incredibly useful, incredibly important. I use them for a lot. When I went through my learning Spanish phase, I was basically addicted to Duolingo, right? There's in ways where if I'd had to use my computer for it, I just wouldn't have learned Spanish as fast as I did. There's a lot of great things with phones, but it's also a source of a ton of toxins. And you really have to take an aware, mindful approach to your relationship with these devices in order to protect your health and your sanity.
That's why I like the title of your book, Empowered. Take charge of your life. That's what I've been trying to do as a reporter and also for my own health for many years. I was a reporter at the Montreal Gazette Daily in 1988. That's where I saw my first cell phone because all the photographers had their huge cell phone,
Yeah.
with the big antenna, and yeah, we all thought it was a great idea.
Yeah, no, they're super cool. But they
Applications, but many applications still work even if you put them in airplane mode, like GPS.
yes. Yeah, GPS will depend on your phone. A lot of them will work, yes, but certainly you'll get your calendar reminders. If you're a podcast addict like I am, you can download your podcasts and then listen to them offline. A lot of people don't realize that you can do the same thing with the Netflix app or the HBO app or the Prime Video app. I do that for airplane rides, so I'll download a bunch of, because otherwise I don't actually like watching video on my phone, but for long airplane rides, I'll download a bunch of content and then from Netflix and then just watch it while I'm on the plane. But you can do, if you like watching video on your phone, you can do that. There are certain games that will work in offline mode. And if you're sitting in one place and you still need internet, but maybe you don't need Wi-Fi, you can get an Ethernet adapter for your phone and then plug into Ethernet and turn off the Wi-Fi and have full connectivity without any EMF. I do want to say, just to clarify for real scientific accuracy, when your phone's in airplane mode, but it's on, it will still emit a little bit of EMF. But it is such a tiny, tiny, tiny sliver of a fraction of what it emits when it's connected that for shorthand, I say putting your phone into airplane mode turns off the EMF. And that is, for all intents and purposes, that is accurate, but it's not truly scientifically accurate because anything that's running on power will emit a little bit of EMF.
Yeah, it's like even your car. I have an electric car. It's not only wireless microwave radiation, which I don't have because I turn off the Bluetooth and the Wi-Fi, but the battery is DC power, and I'm told the meters to read that are very expensive. They're hard to find. That's maybe your major exposure is the DC.
It could be, but and have you interviewed Dr. Paul Heroux or
Yeah,
Heroux? I'm sorry, you're going to pronounce it more accurately than I have.
Ihu. Yeah,
Heroux.
all very well. Yeah.
Yeah. So I ran a conference a couple of years ago, and he was the Healthier Tech Summit, and he was a speaker. And one point that he hit home very deeply to me is that DC current, that's redundant, DC electricity is much less bioactive than AC. And so one of his proposals is to actually flip the grid to DC power. That is obviously a very expensive endeavor. And I was very intrigued by it. And so we got into talking about it, and I thought that was incredibly interesting. That's also why, for your listeners who may care about such things, hybrid cars emit more EMF than electric cars. And that is because hybrid cars have an inverter to to convert your gasoline generated power into DC power, which is what is stored in the battery. And so the inverters tend to be tremendous sources of EMF. That's something I talk about in the book, largely in the context of dirty electricity. But that is why hybrid cars tend to emit more EMF than electric cars. But again, both of these cars, if you have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and radar and all this stuff running at the same time, it's going to be a high source of EMF regardless of the powertrain.
Yeah, I had a friend who was electro-hypersensitive, and he did better in an electric car in a Leaf than in a gas-powered car.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if you know Andrew Mikrowski, who's an architect based in Ottawa. He founded the Planetary Association for Clean Energy, and he's the first person who told me about EMFs. I had I asked him many years ago to measure EMFs in cars, and a friend of mine had two Priuses, a Toyota, and she put her children in the back seat, and she sold her two cars after Andrew measured the magnetic. This
I used to have
exploded.
a Prius. Yeah,
Yeah,
when my father and I were working on Overpowered together, I owned a Prius.
you don't want to sit on the back in the back seat.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, growing up, obviously, with my father, I knew that EMF was like a thing, and I knew why we didn't have a microwave oven, and if I ever used one, to stand as far away from it as possible. And if I ever got a cell phone, which I did eventually, don't hold it against your head so much. I knew a couple of things like that. But I didn't really understand EMF the way that I do until I worked on Overpowered with him. And so when you hear me say things like I owned a Prius, that's why. There were a lot of life choices I made before working on Overpowered that I wouldn't be making today.
Mhm. Live and learn, but certainly you have to measure, right? People
Yeah.
who are interested or not. I think everyone, it should be a household device, eh? Your meters. What meters do you recommend, for instance?
So this actually is the subject of two chapters in Empowered. One is an overview of meters I recommend and what each one does. And then the other one is how you can test for yourself as a regular consumer, not as an expert, which is something I strongly advocate. I believe everyone should be doing this because it's obvious when you say it, but these forces are completely invisible. You can't smell them or taste them unless you're electrosensitive. You can't feel them, and so yes, it's obvious that you should stand pretty far away from your microwave oven. You should turn your Wi-Fi router off when you're not using it. These things are obvious, but there are a ton of these sources in your life that would not be as obvious. So if there's a wiring problem in your wall, you wouldn't, when I say wiring problem, I mean leading to excess levels of EMF emissions, you would have no idea that that was the case. You would have no idea that maybe moving your sofa 1 foot to the right would dramatically reduce your EMF exposure. And so that's why I believe that testing is really, really important. In terms of the meters I recommend, there are many in the book because there are many different types of meters. This is another thing that I've learned over time that consumers don't understand often right off the bat. When they're coming to EMF, they're like, yeah, I want to measure it. What meter do I get? And you have to explain to them, well, there's different types of EMF. And so there's electric field meters, there's Gauss meters for magnetic fields, there's power density meters for radio frequency, There's dirty electricity meters for dirty electricity, and then there's body voltage meters for body voltage. So right there, there's five different types of meters. And so one of the ones, and I talk about meters of all types. Most of them are from the company that you see up here on the screen right now, which is Safe Living Technologies, and they're safe and sound meters, which are widely regarded as the best consumer options available. And I believe Safe Living Technologies refers to them as prosumer, right? So they're not consumer, they're prosumer. And I do know several building biologists who use these in their actual work. But for regular, and so I talk about these meters in the book, but for regular consumers who don't want to spend a huge amount of money and want to get coverage of at least wireless EMF and power line EMF, I talk about the Cornet ED88T and the Tri-Field TF2, because these are two meters that I believe, as last I checked, they're both under $200, and they both cover radio frequency, electric fields, and magnetic fields. They don't cover it as effectively or as accurately as the safe and sound ones do, but they certainly cover it with sufficient accuracy to give you real insight into your immediate environment. And so the Cornet and the Tri-Field are the two I find myself recommending most frequently to most consumers. And then, as I say, I have a separate chapter talking about how to use these meters for testing purposes.
I really like the information that they provide. This photo here is really tells it all. It goes with the building biology exposure,
Yeah.
which are the levels that you want to avoid for sleeping areas. Like anywhere you spend more than 4 hours a day or night, you want to be in the green flashing or green or yellow maximum level for long-term exposure. This is for the radio frequency.
Yeah, and I'll say, and I talk about this in the book because I do talk about the building biology exposure standards, as well as those from the Bioinitiative report, as a counterbalance to the ICNIRP ones that we were talking about earlier, because the building biology and Bioinitiative recommendations are orders of magnitude lower than the ICNIRP exposure guidelines. But I do want to underscore for people that the building biology ones are based in almost exclusively on real world exposures that their building biologists have gone out and measured in terms of levels that trigger symptoms for electrically sensitive people. They're not specifically or explicitly linked to health effects in non-electrically sensitive people. And they are, this is all by way of contextualizing that they are very, very, very low. Getting to green for a lot of people is, especially like if you live in a city, that is not going to be possible. But they're still very useful guidelines, especially as a counterbalance to the ICNIRP standards of thermal effect and the regulatory standards that those are based on.
I'd like to qualify what you're saying. I agree in cities that for healthy people, it's no sense making you sick and worrying, but still, I think the building biology limits are not only based on people's reaction in the real world, but also if you look at Cindy Sage's color charts in the initiative report.
Yeah. So the Bioinitiative results are based on the associations with published science.
Yeah. Here we'd have to convert the centimeter squares to meter squares, but here she's got like 12 or more pages, about 12 pages, 11 pages of references where we see all the biological effects. Now,
yeah, no, the Bioinitiative exposure levels are incredibly low as well. And one of the points that I do make it in the book is for people to understand there's basically no safe level of exposure, depending on how you view the word safe, because any amount of exposure to this human-made toxin is unnatural. And the science, there are different studies on different exposure levels of different frequencies, but for a lot of these frequencies, you can find associations to negative health outcomes at extremely low levels. And I'm not trying to say that the building biology green is based on nonsense. What I am trying to say is that if you can't hit green in your daily life, there shouldn't be a source of anxiety or concern, unless, of course, you are electrically sensitive, in which case this actually does impact your daily life. So you should always try to get less EMF exposure, but you're always going to have some exposure. There is no life available to people anymore unless they want to abandon society, where there is no EMF exposure, where there is no exposure to these toxic forces. And so that is not something that people should keep in mind. And just to sort of benchmark that statement, there is no you going out for a walk without some risk of being run over. There's just none. There might be a very low risk. You could put on, if you're going out at night, maybe you put on a reflective vest so you reduce your risk, but there is no leaving your home without some increased risk of dying. And that doesn't mean you don't leave your home. It means you take precautions when you can, and otherwise you don't think about it. We don't think about that every time we step outside, that we're incurring risk of being run over, because it's just part of our lives. And so that's sort of the approach I advocate with consumers.
Yeah, certainly this whole thing of fear and being always angry at industry and government and everything, that's going to make you a lot more sick.
Yeah,
Many of the exposures out there or the risks that we take daily. Good point.
yeah. And I'll give another example here of direct trade-off. So you, like many people in our little corner of the world, you disable Bluetooth in your car. But let's say someone's listening to this and they say, you know what, I'm going to start doing that too. I'm going to turn off Bluetooth in my car. And then as a result, they're checking their phone more frequently while they're driving. And that is really unsafe, right? So you've reduced your EMF exposure risk, but at the cost of increasing your risk of crashing and harming yourself or others, right? And so that's a trade-off that you really shouldn't be making. If the only alternative to you checking your screen while driving is connecting to Bluetooth, then that isn't that Bluetooth exposure is not the EMF exposure you should be trying to eliminate from your life. Find something else in your life to cut out, some other form of EMF exposure to cut out. This is how people, it just needs to be another one of these forces, just like sugar or alcohol or corn syrup or additive, whatever that you're constantly working this calculus in your head of, oh, did I earn that other piece of cake? No, not today. And that EMF should be part of that set of equations. Again, unless you are electrically sensitive, in which case your life is fundamentally different and you need to. But that would be the same then if you're diabetic, your approach to that piece of cake needs to be very different than it is for someone who's not diabetic.
Mhm. That's what I like about your book. It's not just technical, it's very human. You're talking to people and very nuanced.
Thank you. Yeah. So this is based on, like I said, it's a lot of what I've learned since writing Overpowered, and a lot of what I've learned has been through serving customers and actually figuring out the questions, the right answers to the questions that people actually ask, in a way that they find accessible, digestible, and actionable. And so that's why I believe, and I appreciate you saying what you just said. It means a lot to me. And I think that's where that comes from, because all of the messaging in the book has come from over a decade of real world interactions with real consumers facing real questions.
Mhm. I'm inviting Dr. Annie Sasko to Montreal on October 1st for a talk on cancer prevention, especially in children and youth, because the incidence is going up. And it's going to be a free conference at McGill University. And we're exchanging, a lot of emails. And in the EMFs world, people often get discouraged and angry, as I said. Being in California, and you're a supplier to a lot of people, we read how the Silicon Valley moguls don't send their kids to schools where there's wireless and stuff like that. I guess you must sell some of your stuff to doctors, to people in government, to captains of industry.
Sure.
And uh, Bobby Kennedy is now the Health and Human Services Secretary. So everyone was saying, oh, he's going to ban cell towers, and that went away really fast. But do you have hope that we'll be seeing more and more policies, precautionary policies, stricter regulations? Is,
Ah.
is there a trend coming, or are the lobbies really stifling all that?
Um, so this is a point I make in the book now, and by the way, it's not in your copy of the book. So this has been added since then, right? And so I start. I start the one of the chapters by talking about a Dr. Omalu, who discovered what we now know of as CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, in football players. And he discovered this, and he published, and the NFL shut him down for years. I mean, eventually, and I believe it was over a decade, the NFL accepted the findings. They adjusted the rules of the league. They changed the actual helmets that they use. And one of the reasons I find this example so powerful is because all Dr. Amalu was saying, I mean, he said it with real science, but all he was saying is bashing your head thousands of times can cause brain damage, right? That's all he was saying. And yet they were able to stop him for a decade, something that is immediately obvious to anyone who stops for 5 seconds to think about it. And I also say, at the time at which Dr. Amalu came out with his work, the NFL, the combined value of all of those teams was about $50 billion. So a $50 billion economic concern was able to delay the acknowledgement of fundamentally obvious science for a decade. Now, we contrast that with EMF. And with EMF, this is not fundamentally obvious stuff. You can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't taste it. The sources of these exposures are super addictive technologies. And if you look at the top 10 most valuable companies in the world, 8 of them right now, everything except Berkshire Hathaway, and I forget the other one offhand, but 8 of the 10 make their money by exposing you to EMF, right? If you think about Amazon, they're not a cell phone company, but there's no way for Amazon to make money without exposing you to EMF. There's no way for Google to make money without exposing you to EMF. And so 8 of the top 10 most valuable companies in the world right now are completely dependent on exposing you, for their economic value, on exposing you to EMF. They are worth right now about together $1.4 trillion. And so you compare that to 40 billion, and you're starting to see a lot more economic interest behind delaying any acknowledgement. Then you take it a step further and you realize essentially every company in the world is dependent on the technologies that emit EMF. Even if it's not fundamental to their business model, their team still needs cell phones, they still need to send emails, they're selling online, whatever it is. If the EMF exposures went away, a business would disappear overnight. So not only do you have $1.4 trillion of economic value specifically and directly opposed to these regulatory forces, you effectively have the inertia of the entire global economy does not want to hear this stuff. And I say this all as background to, you asked me if I have optimism that the regulations will catch up at some point. I personally do not. I think they may. I wouldn't put money on it for sure. And that is really implicit in my approach with Empowered, right? So whereas Overpowered really was more of a call to action to get people to adjust safety standards, which was one of my father's real important goals behind all of the work that he did, including Overpowered. Mine is saying, you know what groups like the Environmental Health Trust are doing is awesome. It's really important. God bless them. But nothing's going to change tomorrow. So here's how you can modify your personal lifestyle in order to account for these toxic forces in the world. And so that's the approach that I take with EMF protection. It's largely the approach that I take to coping sanely in a world that feels very much out of my control at this point in time and at my age. There's certain things I can do, and that's what I like focusing on. And so that's what Empowered focuses on. The things that you can do absent regulatory changes, absent government action, absent marketers making companies changing their product designs. I will also say that if enough people do this, then you don't need you don't need this to come from government, because then there will be economic incentive for the companies to be offering safer products. And I believe that's much more likely than seeing top-down regulatory change as it pertains to the EMF issue in particular. Once there is sufficient consumer awareness, and we see this with GMO, we see this with certain types of BPAs, there's tons of consumer awareness-driven safety that is being incorporated into production, absent government action. And I think that's much likelier. But again, until that happens, what you do, you are in control. You have a tremendous amount of power over your personal exposure and your family's exposure. And this book is a guide to how you exert that control.
Mm-hmm. One of my answers to Annie talking about, this inertia is that I know a lot of people generally, not necessarily active EMS activists, who have learned that it's a good thing not to put the cell phone against your head.
Yeah.
They put their Wi-Fi router on a timer. And I've been writing about, healthy and energy efficient homes since, my God, 1989. And I was even writing for the R2000 program, federal, the first energy efficient home program, in 81. It was launched, and we're always wondering, when is it going to be in the building code, And they had healthy building material criteria in their 94, 95 update, which are still not in the codes, but the consumers are asking for those features.
Yeah, and that's what's going to drive change. Because right now we're operating in a landscape where there's effectively no government regulatory framework to make this stuff safer. and there's no consumer demand to make this stuff safer. And the one area where we actually have control, I believe, is in fostering consumer demand, because companies are a lot. They're not going to fight consumer demand. It's just not. It's not in their genetic makeup the way it is to fight regulation.
Yeah.
And companies will do this if the consumers demand it. It's just that simple. They'll start releasing Wi-Fi routers that'll put JRS out of business, and I'm sure nothing would make JR happier than that, because that's what he believes in. They will start doing it themselves if consumers demand it, if there is a market for it.
Well, that Dutch engineer actually, he got very sick designing the latest cell phone technology. Yeah,
Yeah,
but for sure, and I think one way to really get things moving is to inform mothers, because there's no more an activist than a mother worried about the health of their
they're
children.
my biggest customer segment.
Can you imagine? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Ari R. Blank, it's really a pleasure speaking to you today from California. You're CEO of Shield Your Body and the son of one of my heroes, Martin Blank, bless his soul. We could go on for a long time, but that'll be it for today.
No,
But
I appreciate that. And I'll just also mention Empowered. The
the book,
forward is actually written by my father, using some of what he wrote that didn't make it into Overpowered. So kind of a final way of for my father to express his motivation and his framework for approaching these topics. So yeah, and the book Empowered comes out on September 15th. It'll be available Kindle, paperback, and hardback,
with the forward written by Martin Blank
with the forward written by Dr. Blank. Yeah.
many years ago. Thanks very much, Al. Really nice talking to you today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, take good care. Bye bye.